Section 12 of Highways in Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 12. Catherine took one unsteady step towards me and then came forward with a rush. She hurled herself into my arms, pressed herself against me, held me tight. It was like being attacked by a bulldozer. Philip stayed my back against her headlong rush, or I would have been thrown back out through the door, across the veranda, and into the middle of the yard. The strength of her crushed my chest and wrenched my spine. Her lips crushed mine. I began to black out from the physical hunger of a woman who did not know the extent of her newfound body. All that Catherine remembered was that once she held me to the end of her strength and yearned for more. To hold me that way now meant death. Her body was the same slenderness, but the warm softness was gone. It was a flesh-warm waste of flexible steel. I was being held by a statue of bronze, animated by some monster servo mechanism. This was no woman. Philip and Marion pried her away from me before she broke my back. Philip led her away, whispering softly in her ear. Marion carried me to the divan and let me down on my face gently. Her hands were gentle as she pressed the air back into my lungs and soothed away the awful wrench in my spine. Gradually I came alive again, but there was pain left that made me gasp at every breath. Then the physical hurt went away, leaving only the mental pain. The horror of knowing that the girl that I loved could never hold me in her arms. I shuddered. All that I wanted out of this life was marriage with Catherine, and now that I had found her again, I had to face the fact that the first embrace would kill me. I cursed my fate, just as any invalid has cursed the malady that makes him a responsibility and a burden to his partner instead of a joy and helpmeet. Like the helpless, I didn't want it. I hadn't asked for it, nor had I earned it. Yet all I could do was to rail against the unfairness of the unwarranted punishment. Without knowing that I was asking, I cried out, "But why?" in a plaintive voice. In a gentle tone, Marion replied, "Steve, you cannot blame yourself. Catherine was lost to you before you met her at her apartment that evening. What she thought to be a callus on her small toe was really the initial infection of Mekstrom's disease. We're all psi-sensitive to Mekstrom's disease, Steve. So when you cracked up and Dad and Phil went on the dead run to help, they caught a perception of it. Naturally, we had to help her." I must have looked bitter. "Look, Steve," said Philip slowly. "You wouldn't have wanted us not to help. After all, would you want Catherine to stay with you, so that you could watch her die at the rate of a 64th of an inch each hour?" "Hell," I snarled. "Someone might have let me know." Philip shook his head. "We couldn't, Steve. You've got to understand our viewpoint." "To hell with your viewpoint," I roared angrily. "Has anybody ever stopped to consider mine?" I did not give a hoot that they could wind me around a doorknob and tuck my feet in the keyhole. Sure, I was grateful for their aid to Catherine, but why didn't someone stop to think of the poor benighted case who was in the accident ward? The bird that had been traipsing all over Hell's footstool trying to get a line on his lost sweetheart. I'd been through the grinder. Questioned by the FBI, suspected by the police, and I'd been the guy who'd been asked by a grieving elderly couple, "But can't you remember, son?" Them and their stinking point of view. "Easy, Steve," warned Philip Harrison. "Easy nothing. What possible justification have you for putting me through my jumps?" "Look, Steve, we're in a precarious position. We're fighting a battle against an unscrupulous enemy, an undercover battle, Steve. If we could get something on Phelps, we'd expose him in his medical center like that. Conversely, if we slip a millimeter, Phelps will clip us so hard that the sky will ring. He, damn him, has the government on his side. We can't afford to look suspicious." "Couldn't you have taken me in too?" He shook his head sadly. "No," he said. "There was a bad accident, you know. The authorities have every right to insist that each and every automobile on the highway be occupied by a minimum of one driver. They also believe that for every accident there must be a victim, even though the damage is no more than a bad case of fright." I could hardly argue with that. Changing the subject, I asked, "But what about the others who just drop out of sight?" "We see to it that plausible letters of explanation are written." "So who wrote me?" I demanded hotly. He looked at me pointedly. "If we'd known about Catherine before, she'd have disappeared, leaving you a trite letter. But no one could think of a letter to explain her disappearance from an accident, Steve." "Oh, fine." "Well, you'd still prefer to find her alive, wouldn't you?" "Couldn't someone tell me?" "And have you radiating the fact like a broadcasting station?" "Why couldn't I have joined her? You?" He shook his head in the same way that a man shakes it when he is trying to explain why 2 + 2 are 4 and not maybe 5 or 3½ "Steve," he said, "you haven't got Mekstrom's disease." "How do I get it?" I demanded hotly. "Nobody knows," he said unhappily. "If we did, we'd be providing the rest of the human race with indestructible bodies as fast as we could spread it and take care of them." "But couldn't I have been told something?" I pleaded. I must have sounded like a hurt kitten. Marion put her hand on my arm. "Steve," she said, "you'd have been smoothed over, maybe brought in to work for us in some dead area, but then you turned up acting dangerously for all of us." "Who, me?" "By the time you came out for your visit, you were dangerous to us." "What do you mean?" "Let me find out. Relax, will you, Steve? I'd like to read you deep. Catherine, will you come in with me?" "What are we looking for?" "Traces of post-hypnotic suggestion. It'll be hard to find because there will be only traces of a plan, all put in so that it looks like natural logical reasoning." Catherine looked doubtful. "When would they have had the chance?" she asked. "Thorndyke, in the hospital." Catherine nodded, and I relaxed. At the beginning I was very reluctant. I didn't mind Catherine digging into the dark and dusty corners of my mind, but Marion Harrison bothered me. "Think of the accident, Steve," she said. Then I managed to lull my reluctant mind by remembering that she was trying to help me. I relaxed mentally and physically and regressed back to the day of the accident. I found it hard even then to go through the love play and sweet seriousness that went on between Catherine and me, knowing that Marion Harrison was a sort of mental spectator. But I fought down my reticence and went on with it. I practically relived the accident. It was easier now that I'd found Catherine again. It was like a cleansing bath. I began to enjoy it. So I went on with my life and adventures right up to the present. Having come to the end, I stopped. Marion looked at Catherine. "Did you get it?" Silence. More silence. Then, "It seems dim, almost incredulous, that it could be—" with a trail off into thought again. Philip snorted. "Make with the chin music, you two. The rest of us aren't telepaths, you know." "Sorry," said Marion. "It's sort of complicated and hard to figure, you know. What seems to be the case is sort of like this," she went on in an uncertain tone. "We can't find any direct evidence of anything like hypnotic suggestion, The urge to follow what you call the highways in hiding is rather high for a mere bump of curiosity, but nothing definite. I think you were probably urged very gently. Catherine objects, saying it would take a brilliant psychotelepath to do a job delicate enough to produce the urge without showing the traces of the operation. Someone of scholar grade in both psychology and telepathy, said Catherine. I thought it over for a moment. It seems to me that whoever did it, if it was done, was well aware that a good part of this urge would be generated by Catherine's total and unexplicable disappearance. You'd have saved yourselves a lot of trouble and saved me a lot of heartache if you'd let me know something. God, haven't you any feelings? Catherine looked at me from hurt eyes. Steve, she said quietly, a billion girls have sworn that they'd rather die than live without their one and only. I swore it too. But when your life's end is shown to you on a microscope slide, love becomes less important. What should I do? Just die? Painfully? That was handing it to me on a platter. It hurt, but I am not chuckle-headed enough to insist that she come with me to die instead of leaving me and living. What really hurt was not knowing. Steve, said Marion, you know that we couldn't have told you the truth. Yeah, I agreed disconsolately. Let's suppose that Catherine wrote you a letter telling you that she was alive and safe, but that she'd reconsidered the marriage. You were to forget her and all that. What happens next? Unhappily, I told him I'd not have believed it. Philip nodded. Next would have been a telepath-esper team, maybe a perceptive with a temporal sense who could retrace the letter back to the point of origin, teamed up with a telepath strong enough to drill a hole through the dead area that surrounds New Washington. Why, even before Rhine Institute it was sheer folly for a runaway to write a letter. What would it be now? I nodded. What he said was true, but it did not ease the hurt. Then, on the other hand, he went on in a more cheerful vein, let's take another look at us and you, Steve. Tell me, fella, where are you now? I looked up at him. Philip was smiling in a knowing, superior sort of manner. I looked at Marion. She was half smiling. Catherine looked satisfied. I got it. Yeah, I'm here. You're here, without having any letters, without leaving any broad trail of suspicion upon yourself. You've not disappeared, Steve. You've been a-running up and down the country all on your own decision. Where you go and what you do is your own business, and nobody's going to set up a hue and cry after you. Sure, it took a lot longer this way, but it was a lot safer. He grinned wide then, as he went on. And if you'd like to take some comfort out of it, just remember that you've shown yourself to be quite capable, filled with dogged determination, and ultimately successful. He was right. In fact, if I'd tried the letter-following stunt long earlier, I'd have been here a lot sooner. All right, I said. So what do we do now? We go on and on and on, Steve, until we're successful. Successful? He nodded soberly. Until we can make every man, woman, and child on the face of this earth as much physical Superman as we are, our job is not finished. I nodded. I learned a few of the answers at the Macklin place. Then this does not come as a complete shock. No, not a complete shock, but there are a lot of loose ends still. So the basic theme I'll buy. Scholar Phelps and his medical center are busy using their public position to create the nucleus of a totalitarian state or a physical hierarchy. You and the highways in hiding are busy tearing Phelps down because you don't want to see any more rule by the divine right of kings, dictators, or family lines. Go on, Steve. Well, why in the devil don't you announce yourselves? No good, old man. Look, you yourself want to be a Mekstrom. Even with your grasp of the situation, you resent the fact that you cannot. You're right. Philip nodded slowly. Let's hypothesize for a moment, taking a subject that has nothing to do with Mekstrom's disease. Let's take one of the old standby science fiction plots. Some cataclysm is threatening the solar system. The future of the Earth is threatened, and we have only one spacecraft capable of carrying 100 people to safety, somewhere else. How would you select them? I shrugged. Since we're hypothecating, I suppose I'd select the more healthy, the more intelligent, the more virile, the more... I struggled for another category and then let it stand right there because I couldn't think of another at that instant. Philip agreed. Health and intelligence and all the rest being pretty much a matter of birth and upbringing, how can you explain to Wilbur Zilch that Oscar Hassenpfeifer has shown himself smarter and healthier and therefore better stock for survival? Maybe you can, but the end result is that Wilbur Zilch slaughters Oscar Hassenpfeifer. This either provides an opening for Zilch, or if he is caught, it provides Zilch with the satisfaction of knowing that he stopped the other guy from getting what he could not come by honestly. So what is this to do with Mekstrom's disease and supermen? The day that we, and I mean either of us, announces that we can cure Mekstrom's disease and make physical supermen of the former victims, there will be a large scream from everybody to give them the same treatment. No, we'll tell them, we can't cure anybody who hasn't caught it. Then some pedagogue will stand up and declare that we are suppressing information. This will be believed by enough people to do us more harm than good. Darn it, we're not absolutely indestructible, Steve. We can be killed. We could be wiped out by a mob of angry citizens who saw in us a threat to their security. Neither we of the highways nor Phelps of the medical center have enough manpower to be safe. So that I'll accept. The next awkward question comes up. What are we going to do with me? You've agreed that we cannot move until we know how to inoculate healthy flesh. We need normal humans to be our guinea pigs. Will you help bring to the Earth's people the blessing that is now denied them? If you are successful, Steve, said Marion, you'll go down in history along with Otto Mekstrom. You could be the turning point in the human race, you know. And if I fail? Philip Harrison's face took on a hard and determined look. Steve, there can be no failure. We shall go on and on until we have success. That was a fine prospect. Old guinea pig Cornell, celebrating his 70th birthday as the medical experimentation went on and on. Catherine was leaning forward, her eyes bright. Steve, she cried, you've just got to. Just call me the unwilling hero, I said in a drab voice, and put it down that the condemned specimen drank a hearty dinner. I trust that there is a drink in the house. There was enough whiskey in the place to provide the new specimen with a total near anesthesia. The evening was spent in forced badinage, shallow laughter, and a pointed avoidance of the main subject. The whiskey was good. I took it undiluted and succeeded in getting boiled to the eyebrows before they carted me off to bed. I did not sleep well, despite my anesthesia. There was too much on my mind, and very little of it was the fault of the Harrisons. One of the things that I had to face was the cold fact that part of Catherine's lack of communication with me was caused by logic and good sense. Both history and fiction are filled with cases where love was set aside because consummation was impossible, for any number of good reasons. So I slept fitfully, and my dreams were as unhappy as the thoughts I had during my waking moments. Somehow I realized that I'd have been far better off if I'd been able to forget Catherine after the accident, if I'd been able to resist the urge to follow the highways in hiding, if I'd never known that those ornamental road signs were something more than the desire of some road commissioner to beautify the countryside. But no, I had to go and poke my big bump of curiosity into the problem. So here I was, resentful as all hell because I was denied the pleasure of living in the strong body of a Mekstrom. It was not fair. Although life itself is seldom fair, it seemed to me that life was less fair to me than to others. And then, to compound my feelings of persecution, I woke up once about 3 in the morning with a strong urge to take a perceptive dig down below. I should have resisted it, but of course no one has ever been able to resist the urge of his sense of perception. Down in the living room, Catherine was crying on Philip Harrison's shoulder. He held her gently with one arm around her slender waist, and he was stroking her hair softly with his other hand. I couldn't begin to dig what was being said, but the tableau was unmistakable. She leaned back and looked at him as he said something. Her head moved in a no motion as she took a deep breath for another ball. She buried her face in his neck and sobbed. Philip held her close for a moment and then loosed one hand to find a handkerchief for her. He wiped her eyes gently and talked to her until she shook her head in a visible effort to shake away both the tears and the unhappy thoughts. Eventually, he lit 2 cigarettes and handed one to her. Side by side, they walked to the divan and sat down close together. Catherine leaned against him gently, and he put his arm over her shoulders and hugged her to him. She relaxed, looking unhappy, but obviously taking comfort in the strength and physical presence of him. It was a hell of a thing to dig in my mental condition. I drifted off to sleep filled with unhappy dreams while they were still downstairs. Frankly, I forced myself into fitful sleep because I did not want to stay awake to follow them. As bad as the nightmare quality of my dreams were, they were better for me than the probable reality. Oh, I'd been infernally brilliant when I uncovered the first secret of the highways in hiding. I found out that I did not know 1/10 of the truth. They had a network of highways that would make the Department of Roads and Highways look like a backwoods, second-rate political organization. I'd believed, for instance, that the highways were spotted only along main arteries to and from their way stations. The truth was that they had a complete system from one end of the country to the other. Lanes led from Maine and from Florida into a central main highway that laid across the breadth of the United States. Then from Washington and from Southern California, another branching network met this main highway. Lesser lines served Canada and Mexico. The big main trunk ran from New York to San Francisco, with only one large major division. A heavy line that led down to a place in Texas called Homestead. Homestead, Texas, was a big center that made Scholar Phelps Medical Center look like a teeny-weeny village by comparison. We drove in Marion's car. My rented car, of course, was returned to the agency, and my own bus would be ferried out as soon as it could be arranged, so that I'd not be without personal transportation in Texas. Catherine remained in Wisconsin because she was too new at being a Mekstrom to know how to conduct herself so that the fact of her super-powerful body did not cause a lot of slack jaws and high suspicion. We drove along the highways to Homestead, carrying a bag of the Mekstrom mail. The trip was uneventful. End of Chapter 12.